Here we go. First of all, Anna, thank you so much for this awesome talk. It was super interesting. Let's hope many people are going to trace all the things now. Anna is on our Discord channel as well and on Twitter, obviously. So feel free to reach out to her there or there. Yes, and as a last part of TremorCon, we are going to have a little roundtable. And let me quickly introduce, right above me, Natalie, Wayfair's head of the open source project office. I did it wrong again. Can we rename it so I keep it? Top right, Matthias from the Tremor team. Bottom right, Darach, also from the Tremor team. And me, also from the Tremor team. So, open coffee chat. Dear audience, if you want to ask us questions, now is the best time, and we will try to answer your questions as good as we can. Otherwise, you'll have to listen to us ranting on for about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on when we run out of topics.
And feel free to use the Twitch or the Tremor community to ask those questions.
Yes.
Or Twitter. We might catch the odd Twitter.
We will try to monitor it all, but we can't promise. So since we have talked a ton about Tremor, Natalie, do you want to say a few words about the OSPO at Wayfair first?
Yeah, definitely. So firstly, thank you so much for having me. You can also introduce me as Gary's #1 fan as well. Yes. That's also fine. But yeah, so the Open Source Program Office, we use program because it's a kind of best-in-class name across many organizations for this type of team. But yeah, the Open Source Program Office, we're a team of 5 engineers, and we get to sit around and work on open source all day, which is really, really great. Specifically, we work in 3 specific streams around open source. So at Wayfair, we have somewhat, I would say, a young organization in terms of open source work. We haven't really had a lot of strategy up until the last couple of years. Which is when the team came together. And so we try and make sure that we're doing a lot of education around open source. And so we do a lot of embedding with teams to help them make some internal tools that they have available in the open so they can get contributions from the outside world and just teach them generally how to open source. And what's really interesting about that is little workflow tweaks that you need to make between GitHub Enterprise and public and little things like this that may not always be the first thing that they think about. And another really important part of this is actually also open communication. It's something that we try and really teach at Wayfair as a way of, if you need to contact me about an issue in a certain repository, you should comment in the issue on the repo and not jump into the internal Slack and send me a DM this way. So trying to do a lot of that through education is one way my team works. And the second way we do, specifically when you saw Gary doing his talk today, a lot of advocacy and evangelism to the outside world to be able to promote really awesome projects that we have, like Tremor, and a lot of other smaller projects that we've got coming up from Wayfair. And that's a lot of talks, a lot of going to conferences, and also having a lot of organizational kind of partnerships with places like the Linux Foundation, Open UK, those kinds of things. And then third, one of the most important pillars, in my opinion, as well, is the platform area that we also work in terms of the OSPO at Wayfair. So making sure that our general platform for Wayfair engineers to be able to do open source is actually as good as it can be. Automate away all the boring stuff that they don't need to know, and also make it very easy for us to be able to keep on top of how many people are contributing and doing open source at Wayfair. We want to make sure that if you're working on open source at the company, it's actually going to be attributed to you personally as an engineer so that your career can still have this awesome trajectory if you choose to move on in the future. And so having to manage personal GitHub accounts with like the kind of lockdown enterprise Wayfair world is something that we've done a lot of work in automating for our team, and just generally making those platform efforts around GitHub Actions also more accessible for folks who don't know much about them is another important place that my team works on. So that's a bit about us, and I'm the boring manager that gets to work with all of legal and compliance.
Boring is a stretch here. I think with all the things you can be blamed for, boring isn't one of them.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
Let's go clockwise. Matthias, you've been working hard on Tremor 012, haven't you?
Yes, I'm still working on it. So it's yeah. It's like rewriting. Yeah, do we want to spoil?
I think we can spoil.
Okay.
People it's first.
Yeah, it's a rewrite of half the runtime to expose a nice abstraction to the users and to clean out things a bit and to get rid of some of our old technical debt and to make quiescence nicer, to make startup nicer, to make the runtime itself nicer, event handling, anything. So it's connectors. It's a new thing. On-ramp and off-ramp will become connectors. So we are kind of in the process of renaming them to things and sources, but it never really got hold. But this time, like Tremor will be like a new thing, right? It's 0.12. It's a new number. It's shiny. It's one more. It's one number better. It's it could be still better, but that's why it's not infinite yet. So infinity yet. So, but we are humble, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, stay tuned in the next couple of months. This is coming out and and more. I don't want to spoil everything. So it's.
Dark has to spoil a bit too.
Yeah.
Everyone got to spoil.
Spoil it. Spoil it away.
Yes. Do you want to spoil the second part of 012?
Building on a lot of the connectors work, we're also finally, since introducing yet another markup language or YAML, in what was it, Tremor 0.3 or 4? I can't remember.
Something, I think 3.
I think it was 0.3. We've been looking to replace it. So we have replaced a lot of the processing logic has now been replaced by Tremor scripts. So that's where a lot of the ETL is done. The aggregations, so the overall pipeline flow logic has been replaced with Tremor query or the trickle files. So now we're finally building a deployment language, which takes a lot of the work that Matthias has been slaving away on with connectors. It gives us nice things like pause and resume of connectors and quiescence, so deterministic shutdown, which we can use to hopefully build automated stream-oriented test frameworks in the future, are getting wrapped into a deployment language which benefits from some of the hygienic errors and the high degree of low human effort, high usability that we really want for the project by getting rid of the last markup language element from the runtime and from an operator's configuration purview. So the deployment language is the other piece of 0.12 that we're focused on. And these two pieces, connectors and deployment language, are the groundwork for clustering, which is yet to come.
Yeah, so we took a step, and this should improve. It should change the life of someone maintaining and deploying and programming a Tremor application significantly. At least that's our goal.
Naga's life will be utterly transformed for the better.
Yes.
He'll be really happy.
We do this for you, Naga.
So, going a bit back from the technical part, I'm something that might be interesting for people from the outside. How did Tremor and the OSPO start working together? How did this whole come about, Natalie?
I think Dark and I just annoyed each other until it looked like working together. But that's a good question. I think the general concept of the open source program office started with just a single member, which was myself, trying to basically push a lot of the best practices that we knew was out there in the open source world in terms of project governance, in terms of how to open source. And that was definitely something that Tremor was doing at a scale that Wayfair had never seen before for the first time for us. And so we're very much using kind of the blueprints that your team had kind of were trialing and putting together and kind of throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall, seeing what stuck. And then all of a sudden we're now an amazing Italian meal of engineers working on open source. So I think it was definitely kind of Derek and I back and forth trying to work a few things out, and then when we were able to get a few more folks staffed on the open source team, basically being able to get folks paired with Tremor as much as possible to be able to amplify your work, because there's only so much that 3 and 4 people can do. And so being able to amplify a lot of what you're all doing, and building on that, for example, joining the Linux Foundation now that we're a sandbox project in the CNCF, and being able to do a lot more around governance for other projects looking to do the same thing and follow the same path that Tremor already set up. So started as a really great partnership that I think kind of back and forth that molded into something actually that at Wayfair was never done before. And so we've been able to set the scene for other people to come after us.
It definitely is a really great partnership. From the other side of the fence, I can say that it is super great for us to have the support of the OSPO.
And we'll keep doing it until it becomes annoying. Isn't that right, Natalie?
Yes, or until you're graduated and you don't need our help anymore.
Oh, we will happily take your help even if we graduated.
Exactly.
Someone's asking on the chat, do you regret, Anna specifically, do you regret creating Tremor script given the maintenance required to support editors and so on? Interesting.
That's a great question. No, we don't regret creating the language. We do regret creating all of the different syntax highlighters in the various languages that are required for things like training or presentations or IDE integration. But in fairness, they're fairly low maintenance in practice. So it's a small cross to bear for an otherwise better experience for our users. Funnily enough, in the early days of Tremor, where we had other kind of micro languages that didn't have this highlighting support and that didn't have hygienic errors that had a high user experience, we definitely regretted those days, those early couple of months, a lot more than we regretted moving towards a more structured language with first-grade support. And I think our users, people who use Tremor every day, appreciate the fact that usability is a first-class explicit goal of the project. I think that makes it a better project. We could have picked something more obvious like performance or cost, but for us, the primary concern has always been make it easier on the humans, and everything else will follow from that.
It worked out well so far.
Yeah, and a big shout out to the Tower LSP project. It's a Rust crate that takes lots and lots of work from our shoulders. Like, we have a working LSP language server. At least, I don't know if we feature complete. I think not, but it's really nice.
Yeah, it does have syntax highlighting support by now, but we haven't migrated to that yet. That and one of our current mentees who migrated or is migrating the website to a new place where now we pretty much can reduce the need for highlighters to JavaScript and Rust when we get to it, which is a nice bonus to only have 2. But the whole thing of focus on developers is something, I think, again, where there is a bridge with the open source project office. There's this common understanding and goal, which is really nice.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think it's something that you hear a lot in the open source world, this idea about it's less about the tech and more about the people specifically. And I think that's something that both Tremor and the open source program office try and do a lot, is like a work, really closely with people in order to be able to kind of create things that we're trying to create. I think that's something that all the tech skills in the world are actually quite comparatively easy to learn in comparison to learning how to work the best with people that you can. And also making sure that like our own projects and our teams and everything are able to be super inclusive and being able to accommodate all different kinds of learning styles and the way that people want to learn and want to kind of contribute and take part. And so that's something that even open source hasn't fully solved completely yet. And I've learned this specifically from contributing to Kubernetes for a while. And just the scale of that project is obviously really big, but just understanding that even hugely successful, well-known open source projects still struggle with those kinds of things is at least a little humbling to know that at least we will hopefully get there eventually too.
It's good to have a champion for those kind of things from early on, so you can lay the right foundation of doing the right thing or doing as good as you can, and not trying to slap on some solution to it halfway down the road when you have 1,000 contributors. Hopefully we'll have 1,000 contributors one day.
Or maybe 55,000 like Kubernetes does.
Yeah, or 60. We'll do better.
I think the interesting counterpoint here is that, at least philosophically on Tremor, we take the approach and we take the attitude that if someone reports something that's difficult or confusing or doesn't work quite in the expected way that they would expect, we accept that as a bug, and we accept the responsibility to go ahead and improve it, to fix it, to make it better. And that's a pretty good philosophy to run with. I think that's... and that also helps to build the community in the right way, because the community is empowered by its very nature to go, hey, this doesn't quite work. And we go, oh, we're sorry about that. And let's see if we can make it better. And I think it saves a lot of busy talk that we don't have to get into, because we assume, best case, we did something wrong and we're willing to fix it. We hope we never get to a worst case. That would be bad.
Yeah. And bugs happen in the end. Both the humankind and the code kind. Before we go on with ranting off about topics that interest us, chance for the people listening, go through in a question. You have the chance to talk to the four of us now and ask all the things you're curious about. All the wishes, voice them. If you want to have syntax highlighting in different colors in the next release, now is your chance to get that. Question about Tremor, question about open source at Wafer as well, since we are lucky to have Natalie above us. Anyone, go ahead. Otherwise, let's go to a next topic. And we have seen that, and sadly Naga is already back to his vacation. And this comes in nice with something Anna said earlier on the chat. A blog post on reducing log storage cost with Tremor. We're doing something fairly interesting with the rate limiting, and that's throwing away data, which most people run away screaming if they hear about that. Matthias, you want to run us through why we do that?
Yes. So, I think what was it? I want to bring up the mental picture of the fire hose hosing that poor guy in front of the car again. Thank you, Gary. And so yeah, that's why. In the logging domain and in the metrics domain from which Tremor came, it's okay to throw away data because it's, as Naga said, like 90% of the signals roughly are not utilized and do not bring value to people. It's hard to choose what. So, but after all, we need to keep our downstream services working. So working services are better than failing services, obviously. So if this holds true, then, and this holds true for logging and metrics, then we can throw away stuff, and it makes stuff cheaper. So I want to highlight that there are other domains too where throwing away is not an option. So with Tremor, you have the possibility to throw away a small random percentage. You can throw away a percentage by kind of classification, and you can throw. But what you also can do is you can basically apply back pressure on the upstream service if it's supported, and this is supported. This is now, with the next release, it's going to be supported even without throwing away messages. So, for example, if you consume from a Kafka topic and your downstreams are overrun, and Kafka is the perfect buffer, then you can just apply a back pressure that works with our internal circuit breaker mechanism, and we're just going to wait, hey, stop consuming, and yeah. And this is, I think this makes Tremor more applicable for domains where you cannot throw away data, where you have some transactionality in place.
So if you've got a transactional work case or workload, and you absolutely must preserve every single message without loss, it's difficult to do in a system where end to end, there might be slowdowns for various reasons beyond Tremor's control. So it's an analog of quality of service in a lossy domain, is to actually respect and to work with back pressure in the transactional domain to ensure that a buffer is kept at all costs. But obviously, this is the world's most expensive approach to distributing data, where it's fully transactional and the downstream systems are overloaded. But Tremor has implemented its internal infrastructure so that both of these worldviews are possible. I think the thing with Tremor is, but you have to configure the transaction case explicitly. We default to the lossy worldview, but you can absolutely configure the transactional worldview where and when it's needed. So yeah.
So we do some. We also we optimize for high volume loss for the high volume lossy domain, and we take some nasty shortcuts to be really fast and resource efficient in that domain. And for the lossless domain, it's it's new to us, but I think we serve it well. We also have a wider headlog that you could employ. So there's lots of toolings now for this domain as well. So Tremor is not, if someone told you Tremor is not applicable here, don't believe them. Don't believe us either. Just check the docs.
Or talk to us, or try. A nice question from Anna. Is Tremor looking to invite non-wafer maintainers to the project to reach the CNCF graduate status?
I think the short answer for that is yes. I mean, if the project is interesting to you, if it's interesting to your work, the way to become a core maintainer is to contribute, and eventually we'll get to a point with your contributions that we don't understand your code. So we'll need you to support it and become a maintainer for the health of the project. So I don't think there's any magic here other than contribute things of importance to a production environment for some value of production that's relevant for the project. And you will, by this path, become a core maintainer over time. Contribute lots and you'll become a maintainer. We will probably demand it if they are good enough and frequent enough. I think it would be the obvious path.
And it's worth saying that it's not for the sake of becoming an incubating project. It is something that has to happen naturally from contribution and interest. If Tremor interests you, we are open to taking on maintainers. We won't force someone to be a maintainer just to reach a status.
Yeah, I think what's also important about that is the if an open source project wants to be truly global and asynchronous, being able to take on maintainers that are also in other parts of the world with other different experience outside of the little Wayfair bubble we're all in right now is actually super important. So it's something that I can imagine that specifically on the open source program office side and eventually for Tremor too, actually that's going to be eventually something as a goal, getting a maintainer that's actually outside of Wayfair or outside of the main Tremor kind of bubble that we're in to ensure a lot of that can happen. And also just making sure that, not everyone's in an EU time zone. So being able to kind of get support at a different time or being able to, have people around at different times who speak different languages might be also a really, really good idea. So I think getting maintainers outside of Wayfair is actually awesome.
Yeah, and speaking practically, the project is fully governed in the open. A lot of our decisions are made in the open. A lot of the design sessions are done on the community Discord. I'd say most of the contributions, if you look at the number of contributors over any period of time, is probably from outside of Wayfair via the mentees and via the mentorships rather than from inside of Wayfair. So our activity is already very much moving towards fully open development. But I think we still need that one project at that one organization to bite Tremor and to bite into Tremor such that they want to become a maintainer. And we haven't found that organization or project yet, or perhaps they haven't found us. But hopefully they'll find that we're ready. By the time they're ready to bite, we're ready to be bitten.
Plugging shamelessly at that point, again, if you're interested in contributing, if you're interested in working on Tremor, come to our Discord server. We are nearly always there. Our current and past mentees are there to help and guide along with us. Natalie is there, Gary is there, Anna is there, Naga is there, all the other awesome people, part of the community, are there. So come by and say hi. It's chat.tremor.rs. Also, that's where we are holding our monthly open office hours, which is, I believe, next Tuesday. Second Tuesday of each month.
Yes, come and bite us, and we promise we won't bite you back.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so we have help wanted and good first issue labels on our GitHub issues. So if you want to search for like a task to take on, you can also have a look there. Yep. If you want to kind of steer and discuss where Tremor is going, we have the Tremor RFCs repository, where we suggest changes to the open and like significant changes. Mm-hmm. For example, right now it's the connectors. We have the subquery RFC as part of a mentorship, and so these are there for you to comment on and to give us some feedback on. And if you have ideas, we are more than happy to discuss yours. So there are plenty of tasks. And yeah, if you're not sure, like join our Discord and ask us. We are happy for everyone helping, and we are happy to help.
Yeah. Gary, no, not Gary. Glow8 asks, how did you all get to work into Tremor? And says, sorry if that was already asked. Glow, it wasn't asked. And even if it were, you wouldn't need to be sorry.
That does bring up an interesting subject, Heinz.
Yeah.
It's tomorrow is Matthias's 1-year anniversary with Tremor.
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Happy Tremor-versary to Matthias.
Should we sing happy birthday to embarrass Matthias?
We probably should.
We
although I don't have a singing voice, so I'll let you go ahead, Heinz.
We can say Happy Crab Day.
Happy Crab Day. Yes.
Crab with a P? No.
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 Bad
No.
Bad.
So yeah,
the joke was handed to me.
Yeah.
Heinz and I basically joined Wayfair around the same time. Heinz a few weeks before me, 3 years ago, or just over 3 years and 3 months or so ago, and we joined to build what is now known as Tremor. We didn't join to build open source. That sort of was part of our journey with Wayfair and with the project as it grew internally. It grew in a way that was amenable to open source. So it hadn't been a path that was well traveled at Wayfair, but we decided we were going to travel it for Wayfair and on behalf of Wayfair. And I think it's worked out particularly well.
The stars aligned well with Natalie and her team.
The stars aligned well. And was it a year before you joined, Matthias? Matthias bumped into us at BobConf, which is a conference in Berlin.
Worth
he saw us
speaking
and eventually applied for work when we were hiring on the team and joined us that way. So we met Matthias through that conference.
Yeah, and I also want to mention that I joined and I got to know about BobConf and Darach and Tremor and anything because I was involved in the maintenance and development of the Pony programming language. Like I didn't invent it, but I just helped a bit. And so Darach also was also kind of involved. And so I knew Darach, and I just wanted to say hi on this conference. I said hi. So it's my.
Oh, you wanted to say hi, not hire me. So that's all is just a big
we already hired him, so
but
it's too late for that.
Okay, a big misunderstanding. But it happened.
So in a sense,
point I wanted to make
met us through open source.
Yeah, that's the point I wanted to make.
And esoteric languages. Pony,
Yeah,
Darach, we meet based on Erlang.
Yes, yes, we also met through open source,
Yes,
but that was 15 years ago, Heinz.
And
so it sort of doesn't count as
esoteric
much.
languages. So the moral of the story is write more esoteric languages. You get to know interesting people.
Yeah, and open source, when we think about it, putting people first over process does actually work. I mean, the relationships that we're seeing here, whether it's through the wider Tremor community or on the core team, all started at some point in their evolution through open source. Whether it's within the context of work, where we work very closely with our open source program office, through Natalie and her team's work, through Gary's work. But I met Heinz through open source. He misjudged when the last train was in London 15 years ago and ended up sleeping on my couch when I was living in London. It was a nice couch.
It was a nice couch.
I do want to say no one has to sleep on anyone's couch to get into open source.
That's true.
Exactly.
But it was a good couch.
Yeah, I think it's getting a lot easier today to work on open source. When I started my career, it was a really tough argument with the business to get anything anywhere near open source. It wasn't something that was understood by the business. It hadn't built up a kind of a value or trust mechanism that businesses understood or could engage with. One of the first businesses to really embrace open source would be Red Hat or Sun Microsystems, who were pioneers in this space. But today, it's really, really quite simple to get involved in open source. And most companies are involved in open source in some way, shape, or form. So it's becoming the de facto standard way of working on commodity infrastructure and systems level engineering software. So if you're interested in things like Tremor or other cloud native Compute Foundation projects, then having a look at what the Linux Foundation, the CNCF, or other foundations like Oasis are doing is a great way to start into a career where you think open source is going to be a part of that story.
Anna confirms that you have to sleep on couches to get into open source. So
and maybe sleep on a couch, but only do it once.
But it has to be a nice couch. And it is, I think it's easier today to get into open source than back years back. Our mentees are a testament to that, I think.
Yeah.
All of them were really excited to work on open source. In the Q&A, every single one said that was a major driver for them to get involved. And I think two of the current mentees are also now not purely CNCF mentees, but sponsored to the open source project office, aren't they? Oh, god damn it! I'm quitting.
Project program pony. It's okay. But on your point, Heinz, I think that was a really interesting point. How a while back it maybe was a bit harder to get into open source than it is now. I definitely think it's because, as open source has evolved to understand that it needs a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different kinds of people working on things for software to be better, they realize there can't be as much it's who you know attitude anymore, actually. It really is, open source is really about, are you willing to jump in and help out and do a bit of work? That's actually all it's really about.
A perfect example from one of our mentees who's doing something that myself, Heinz, and Matthias certainly couldn't do is Sharon. So her work on reimagining Tremor's kind of website and the design and how the information is put together and making it usable. We couldn't do the job that she is doing on that website. We can come up with content, but we can't make it web in that way. Whereas she's knocking it out of the park, and this is the value of open source: is you build on each other's strengths. So everyone has something to contribute, and no matter how strong a particular team might be, or project or organization at some things, they're going to be weak at other things. And where projects have a weakness, there's an opportunity to contribute. That's the way to look at this. And everyone has something to contribute to some project.
Yeah, if you think about it in the way of like just very much like open source communities, is very similar to real communities where you move into a new place. You want to, meet your neighbors and to build trust with them. You maybe do odd little jobs here and there, show that you're reliable, show that you can kind of, do a few things that maybe the community needs, and that's exactly how open source works
for example, sleep on the empty couches.
Yes. Someone needs to fill those couches.
Right, exactly. Provide a couch for someone in need, and all of a sudden they're going to help build a huge open source system with you one day. So yeah, totally. It's definitely about and in my team as well. When we go about doing open source, we use the same kind of philosophy where introduce yourselves. You need to kind of be really open and respectful of the other people that you're choosing to work with in the different communities that you're looking to join, but putting your hand up to do a bit of work here and there. It's going to be work that doesn't pay you, but pays you back in really interesting ways in terms of maybe getting a job eventually that does open source, or maybe being able to be a co-maintainer of a project, maybe being able to influence the product roadmap of a certain project. Those kind of things are all able to kind of give you back so much more in terms of your career in general, like great well-being and altruism in tech, that I think sometimes gets lost because everyone's too busy making big money.
That's very true. Empathy is a really, really important skill that's hard to learn, and I think the nice thing is, just like open source, it becomes more prevalent in our industry and people are thinking more about it. Looking back at the years of my life, I know that when I started open source, that was absolutely a topic I didn't recognize. And now it's something that is on the forefront of most all projects, which is amazing to see how the industry has transformed.
By the way, Mario, thanks for... Oh, sorry. I was about to say to Mario, thanks for asking your question. I hope you're healing up really good, by the way.
So yeah, like on the other hand, like the open source business is kind of completely underfinanced. So if you work in a company that is using open source as part of their product, urge them to pay back in one way or another. Yep. Because there are people, we are sponsored by Wayfair, but like all the contributors that contributed to us, they did it on their own time. And so thank you for that. And so thanks for all the manpower. Just imagine OpenSSL, just imagine everybody's relying on this. Imagine Kubernetes. So try to give back. That's the message. Because everybody is underfunded.
Natalie, you wanted to say something?
I was about to say, you're going to say Glow 8, but it's Mario.
Oh, yeah, I can barely remember my own name. Or what OSPO stands for. If someone wants me to address them by their name, they put their name there. Otherwise, my brain doesn't work. And I'm sorry for that, but I'm just broken that way. So, Mario, I will remember this for the next 5 seconds, asks, also what educational level do you have? If you don't mind sharing. Are you satisfied with this? University, masters, and so on. I'm not sure what to do with my life after graduation this year. I'd love some advice for students. That's
a great question.
Yeah, it is.
Great question. And we're talking about couches. Come and sit on the Tremor couch to get some life advice. I like this.
Who wants to get started? So I guess I graduated first. So
yeah.
Well, let's start there. I did an undergraduate and a master's degree, so I'm also a chartered engineer. I'm not sure how useful these things were. I think they were useful in that they were subjects I was interested in. I don't think after 25, 30 years I use much of those degrees in my day-to-day within kind of software programming or industrial engineering. I think they're if you find that kind of second or third level education to be useful, go ahead and do it if you're interested in the topic. If you're interested in formal methods or you're interested in the academic side of things, I think it can be extremely valuable. But in industrial environments, we get limited use out of a lot of the content that we come up with. And having a hobby that gets you hands-on programming or developing with electronics and in any science, technology, engineering, or maths subject, I think that's as good a start as any. So it really depends on the individual. If you have the interest, the curiosity, the aptitude, and the attitude, and a little bit of discipline to do the work, I think anyone can be a good software programmer or software engineer. You don't necessarily need the master's or the PhD. My areas happen to be in networks and distributed systems. And my undergrad was in computer science. I also have a maths degree. So I've used all of these in some way indirectly, although I don't think I directly benefited from them other than I had 4 enjoyable years not working until I started my working life. So I'd recommend after your graduate studies or undergraduate studies, take some time off and do something you enjoy. Travel the world. If there's a musical instrument you played, pick it up. Definitely don't drop it after you graduate for pet projects. If you take photographs, keep taking those photographs. Because one thing you'll find after many years in this industry, it can be quite draining.
Yep.
So remember the life-work balance, and that is life first. And maintain those hobbies, don't give them up, because when you start to get older, more useless, those hobbies will start to become important again. So I would put an emphasis on life over work here, especially after graduating what might be a pretty tough course under pretty tough conditions. Take a little bit of a break.
And that's been Dr. Darach.
Yes, and this is really interesting because I come pretty much from the other side of the spectrum. I dropped out of university when studying computer science after 2 years. And pretty much everything I know is either self-taught or learned by doing. And we hear this discussion in the industry quite a lot, especially now with boot camps. Do you need this? Is it useful? Is it useless? Is it not? And those discussions very often go into this very, very A versus B and totals, which ignores that different people learn differently. And you can be good at a topic, be it computer science, be it anything else, in a dozen different ways, and different people need different foundations. The one but that always gets overlooked is no way is a shortcut. If you want to be good at something, you need to put the effort in. If you want to be okay at something, you might not need to put the effort in. You don't need to work 20 hours a day. Please don't work 20 hours a day. But if you want a educational knowledge equal to 4 years of learning, you will probably need to put in 4 years of learning. If that happens at a university or at home or at a job, it's second rated. It's depending on what works for you. But shortcuts, well, if there exist, please tell me. I want to take a few. But to my knowledge, shortcuts don't exist. But you can be successful studying, or you can be successful not studying, or dropping out of university.
And there are folk who are brilliant academics who are useless in the industrial environment working, and there are folks who are brilliant in the industrial environment and context who would make useless academics. So these things aren't like kind of night and day. They're very individual. So we kind of have to reflect on what works for us. I mean, by the time I went to university, I'd been programming from the age of about 8 or 9. So did I really learn all of those things at university that I use today? I don't think I did. I think I knew a lot of it before I attended university. I was already a big nerd by that stage. So for me, I don't think it mattered, but I still got value out of the university education because I found other interests that allowed me to find other interests, and somehow I've ended up here today. So I think being curious is, I think, more important, and pursuing those curiosities and putting an effort into learning them and learning them well is far more important than the environment that you choose to do that work.
The important thing to take from this is embrace differences. Don't assume what works for you works for others.
Yep.
Matthias, you wanted to say something, please.
I wanted to say that if the university is such a place that gives you the time to dig into topics that are of your interest, then use it. And so I have a cheap bachelor's degree in applied computer science, so it's basically worth nothing. I kind of learned everything I know on the job, and I had great opportunities in working with great people and great systems. So it's on great systems. So definitely, if you can choose something interesting and challenging, you might think you're not suited for, because you're going to grow, and what could possibly happen.
Natalie,
so that's
if we ask you for an opinion on that too.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. So I also have a bachelor's and a master's in ancient history and Egyptology. Tech was not my first career.
So you use more of your degree than we use of ours.
Probably, actually. A lot of analytical thinking, a lot of research, a lot of writing. My university degree definitely prepared me for a large amount of documentation writing that open source requires and is good for. But yeah, I was supposed to be an archaeologist, specifically an Egyptologist, and my career got derailed because I studied at the same time I was supposed to go on a couple of digs in Egypt. The Arab Spring in Egypt happened at the same time, and my university wasn't able to send us as a class. And I wasn't able to finish my master's degree in the correct way that would give me the platform for an archaeological career that it usually takes. For anyone interested in archaeology, you need a lot of experience working for free that you usually get during university and masters to be able to get a foothold in that industry. So it really is about who you know often and not what. And so unfortunately that meant that I had to do plan B, which was all the websites I was making on the side for friends and small clients and all the tech I taught myself on the side there, and kind of using that as a platform to get a career in tech instead. So yeah, I probably do use my degree, but just like everyone else has mentioned, I decided to do something I was super interested and curious about and wanted to get involved in. And I actually used a lot of information from my Egyptology days in a recent talk I did last year at Write the Docs, where I talked about how to understand and give context to the ancient history of your project. And it's something that really interestingly, even Tremor has experienced, where we get folks who are really interested in contributing coming in and saying, why did you make this decision? Why are you doing this? This is not the way to do it, and not understanding the ancient history behind the needs that Tremor actually had to kind of, look at first as it was being built and scaled the way it is. So I would say that what was really interesting about my general career path is that I only learned to love the career that I'm now in much later. I definitely did it for the money, and that's absolutely okay to do, by the way. But learned to very much love it later on. So I still actually have a couple of hired whiz books at home that I still look into to kind of involve myself in that interest. But
and we benefit greatly
Yes.
from this on Tremor, because whenever someone pops along and says, hey, why did you make those decisions? We simply state the pharaohs told us to do it.
It's written in the prophecy.
It was written on a tablet.
So to sum up the answer, Mario, do what makes you happy. If you study something entirely unrelated to what you do, you'll be fine. If you get, and I'll quote you, Matthias, a cheap bachelor's degree and do something you enjoy, you'll be fine. If you finish your master's in the field you're working on, you'll be fine. And if you drop out of university, you'll probably also be fine.
Yeah, just do something that you're interested in, that doesn't bore you, that you get value out of, that can deliver value to whichever organization or project or endeavor you are working with and contributing to.
Yeah.
If you do these things, you can't go far wrong, regardless of where you start. There's a path there, and that's the important thing.
And make connections, talk to people, get to know people. That's like half. You've seen it. Darach and me met, and so we ended up together. Matthias and Darach met, so we ended up together.
And if something goes wrong, it's the pharaoh's fault.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. Worrying is pointless.
Care about people. We are a bit over time on the coffee chat. If there are any more questions, we're happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to ask everyone for their famous last words. Bit of spoiler what's upcoming, bit of interesting tidbits they want to share. Chat, going once? Going twice? Going 3 times? No more questions. Then let's do the reverse order. Darach, famous last words.
Don't worry about it. The pharaohs told me to do it.
Good one. Matthias.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the firehouse again.
Yes.
Sorry, it's
Go.
yes,
Go.
and yeah, think of I like you also to think of Tremor as a like firehose with a nice display and control, like a Star Trekky. Like you can control the flow, right? It's that's what we are. I think we put that on the website.
We should put that on the website.
Yeah.
Natalie, famous last words.
Yeah, definitely. Empathy is super important. You don't know what someone else is going through when they're writing that horribly worded issue that they're putting on your project. It's okay. We can solve it with a bit of empathy and caring about each other.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, then I will end with saying thank you for all our mentees who spoke today. You have done an awesome job, and without you, this conference wouldn't have possible, and Tremor wouldn't be where it is today. Thank you for the Wayfair colleagues who spoke. Gary, Naga, thank you. And last but not least, thank you to Anna, she's kind of a cornerstone of the community, isn't she? Thank you so much for taking the time speaking and coming to join us. Thank you for the CNCF and Wayfair to making this all possible. And we will see you around. Bye-bye.
And we'll do it again because the pharaohs told us to do it.
Yes. TremorCon Egyptology Edition. It's coming.
2022.
Bye, everyone.
Stay tuned. Bye.